I never meant for things to get so out of hand. It all started innocently enough, with just a flicker of curiosity. My neighbor, Mr. Smith, was an odd man. Quiet, reclusive, always slipping in and out of his house at odd hours. He never mingled with the other neighbors, never waved hello. He just existed, like a shadow in the corner of my vision. My name is Jaiden Gray, and this is how I died. One day, while I was sorting through my mail, I noticed a letter addressed to him that had mistakenly ended up in my box. The envelope was thick, bulging with what looked like cash, and my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside, there was indeed a wad of cash, hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars, and a short typed note that simply said, "Next time, make it cleaner." I froze. What could this mean? My mind immediately went to the darkest places, but I pushed those thoughts aside. Maybe it was some weird joke. Maybe it was nothing, but I couldn't leave it alone. I started watching him more closely, piecing together the little details that I had previously ignored. He never left trash out on the curb, no cans, no bags. He didn't seem to have a job, yet he always had money. And that strange, metallic smell that sometimes wafted from his basement. I should have gone to the police. But instead, I sent him a letter. I typed it out on an old typewriter I found at a thrift store, making sure there were no fingerprints or traces back to me. It was simple. I know what you're doing. Leave $10,000 in an envelope under the old oak tree by midnight tomorrow, or I'll tell the police. I felt a thrill like nothing I'd ever experienced before when I slipped the letter into his mailbox. It was intoxicating, having that kind of power over someone. The next night, I found the money right where I'd told him to leave it. He didn't even try to negotiate, didn't fight back. He just paid. It became a routine. I'd send a letter, he'd leave the money, and I'd feel invincible. Each time, I pushed a little harder, asked for a little more, and each time he complied without question. It was like he was terrified of me. But then, one night, I asked for too much. I demanded $50,000, and that's when things changed. I found the envelope under the oak tree, but instead of money, there was a note. "Meet me at my house. We need to talk." My heart pounded in my chest as I stood on his doorstep. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe he was going to try to negotiate. Maybe he'd finally had enough. But I never expected what happened next. He opened the door before I even knocked. His eyes were dark, deeper than I had ever noticed before, and there was a strange calmness about him. "Come in," he said softly, stepping aside to let me pass. The house was eerily silent, the air thick with that metallic scent I'd noticed before. He led me to the basement door, and my blood ran cold. I tried to make an excuse to leave, but he just smiled, an empty, hollow smile. "I've been expecting you," he said as he opened the door and gestured for me to go down. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. As I descended the stairs, the smell grew stronger, and I realized what it was. Blood. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement was dimly lit by a single swinging bulb. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with jars of something. I didn't want to know what. And in the center of the room was a large metal table. It was stained red, and strapped to it was a body, fresh but lifeless. I backed away, horror clawing at my throat, but he was already behind me, his hand on my shoulder, squeezing just enough to hurt. "You wanted money?" he whispered in my ear. "This is how I get it. You know too much now." I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat as I realized my mistake. I had been so blinded by greed and power that I had walked right into the lair of a monster. And now, there was no escape. He pushed me toward another table with a wooden surface, strapping me down with the quickness. He pulls out a knife and plunges it into my shoulder blade, pinning me down. I let out a piercing scream, and then he does the same to the other shoulder. The pain was so great, I started to lose consciousness. He dashes water on me to make sure I stay awake. And he says to me, "I always thought you were a gorgeous girl and never wished any harm to you. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you? You couldn't just take the money and leave, could you? Well, that's fine. My pets were getting hungry." He pulls out a jar of ants and releases them on me. I begin to feel the bite of 1,000 bites at once, and Mr. Smith's sinister laugh in the background. I can't stop screaming. If you could imagine your entire body being eaten alive and can't do a thing about it, and then get hit with a sigh of relief as he douses me down with a water hose to clean the ants. He whispered, "I'm sorry, honey, but you brought this on yourself." He backs up, opens a box, and then I hear a constant rattling. Oh my God, a rattlesnake, not just one, but 3. He lets them loose on top of me and they begin to slither all over me. I'm crying so hard right now, trying my best not to panic, but I can't stop shaking. I can't keep my composure anymore and begin to freak out. And then I feel a sharp pain in my thigh. I'm bitten. One strikes me and then I completely freak out and I can't help myself, and they all begin biting me simultaneously. Within a few moments, I begin to feel weaker. And that's when I saw him, standing in the corner, watching us. He was tall, cloaked in black, his face obscured by shadows. But I knew who he was, the Grim Reaper. I blinked, trying to make sense of it, but he didn't move, just stood there, waiting. Who is that? I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Smith with a slightly confused look on his face. But then he just smiled again, that same hollow smile. "You should never have crossed me." I tried to free myself, but at this point I'm far too weak. I'm fading out fast. My heartbeat slowing. I looked towards the corner, but the Reaper moved without a sound. And suddenly, he was in front of me, his hand cold as death itself, resting on my forehead. I felt the life drain out of me as everything went dark. The last thing I heard was the rattling of the snakes and Mr. Smith's voice, calm and collected as ever. "What a shame, my dear. You were truly a beautiful girl, but you should have left well enough alone." And then, there was nothing.